Awesome. So today we're going to be learning about GraphQL. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we are doing that first, and like kind of give you a sense of what we're doing here, um, and like what this is. Basically, the reason I'm teaching you this is A, I was just learning it, so figured I would teach it. But B, and more importantly, one of the reasons why I was learning it is because it's rapidly becoming one of the standards, kind of the alternative to RESTful routing, for a lot of really, really, really good reasons. So if like last time I was checking LinkedIn and I was scanning the like junior developer like requirements and like a lot of the roles, GraphQL was almost always in one of the either required or highly preferred skills that you could have, right? Um and at heart, it's not too complicated, and it's not even really a technology. It's more just like a convention that we agreed to. I'm going to be showing you how we can use Rails with GraphQL. But basically, the idea behind it is it kind of works like, let's go ahead and like find an example. Basically, you send a request to one route that looks kind of like this, and it will send back the information that you specifically asked for and nothing else, is the idea behind it. And you can create stuff by going to the same route and sending something called a mutation, which is just we built some general rules to like create something. But basically, what it allows you to do is basically ask for a whole lot of different things at once and get exactly what you asked for. So previously, if you like the reason why it came out, Facebook, I think originally developed it. And I remember back when in like 2012, Facebook was like, check out our new graph search engine. It'll allow you to search for like your friends who are in Missouri and are into multi-level marketing schemes and are looking for knives right now. Like, which are just like, if we were doing this in the classical like RESTful way, right? We'd maybe have to create a new route for that. Like be like, hey, we need a route for only my friends. And then like a bunch of query string parameters that like would have to be like really hard coded to go ahead and say like into like some bunch of model methods to be like, okay, cool, we need to like figure out who these friends are, like whether they're into knives, whether they're into multi-level marketing schemes. And it becomes this really, really complicated backend if you want to start asking for a lot of specific information. So what Facebook said was, hey, we're always asking for like information on 3 different tables that is very specific, and we don't want to have to create a new like RESTful routing for every single one of these things. So why don't we just build a convention that says, hey, this is how you ask for anything in our database, and this is how we respond. And a bunch of people caught on, and now there's tools for most frameworks to allow us to do this, to allow us to kind of like implement this sort of schema and the sort of pattern on a bunch of different backends. So this right here is a good example of like a request that you would make in GraphQL. You'd be like, hey, I want to get all of the films in your database. I want to get their title, their opening crawl, and their rating. And meanwhile, can you please send back, oh, cool. And then it just like goes ahead and spits this out, right? It'll like try to document it for you so you don't really have to worry that much about it. It is like, the convention is really, really good, and it solves a lot of problems for users. It's less that it's quicker. It's like often the way you build it, you need to really think about how you're making, whether you're making it quicker or not. It's just that it allows you to be very, very specific and give give users exactly what they want and give them the option to ask for exactly what they need. And like give front-end developers specifically that. So basically what it'll allow me to do, right, is if I want to, I can be like, hey, give me all the restaurants that are in Poughkeepsie that are Thai along with their average rating, right? Like, and I can just write that in one fetch that's basically a string that looks kind of like this.
Should we use like in our backend or front end?
So it's a two-part, right? The backend can be set up to accept a GraphQL request, which is what I'm going to show you. Though I'd be careful about like using it for your project, you should still be able to talk about RESTful routing. The front end is just going to be, you're sending a fetch request that's a post to exactly one route that has a different string in each time. So because you're always going to be fetching to exactly one route as a post request.
Post request.
Yeah, it's all like basically the general thing is you just create a post, like an open route to /GraphQL that you send a post to with this big string in it, and it will always give you back the data you need. And that's the idea behind GraphQL. Cool.
What about like Faraday? Is there any like gem about like Faraday, and is it helpful for using?
Faraday is for network requests, right?
Yes.
It's like a JavaScript, or is it? Oops, is it a Ruby request?
Yeah, it's a gem.
It's somewhat different. I forget what Faraday does.
Okay.
Oh, right. No, that's just allows Ruby to make network requests. In this case, right, we're probably going to be making the request through our front end, not our back end. Faraday is like HTTP party or anything else. It's just a network tool you can use. But let me just go ahead and show you a little bit about what GraphQL looks like. So basically first, I'm going to go ahead and go to our docs, right? And these docs, I could take them or leave them, TBH. But it starts off by going ahead into our backend, and we'll do a little bundle add GraphQL, which is the gem that we're going to be using to implement GraphQL on the backend. GraphQL, once again, is just a pattern. But like it's a set of specifications that Facebook released, I hope it was Facebook, otherwise I'm making stuff up, to go ahead and be like, hey, this is a good way to ping the backend that we're using. And right now we have a gem called GraphQL, right? And then we run basically this bit right here. And it gives us a ton of new stuff. First off, it goes ahead into our routes, and it says, hey, when you get a post to /GraphQL, run GraphQL #execute. Cool. So anytime we get a post request to GraphQL, just run this controller's action execute. If we go to the GraphQL controller, we'll see some very cool things that we'll talk about a little bit later. A lot of this isn't going to make that much sense, which is fair. But we also don't need to really deal with this, with the exception of this context thing, which is phenomenal for a couple of different reasons. But we will notice it is inheriting from application controller, which is great. We are not outside of Rails yet. We are not outside of the same MVC pattern. However, we're basically going to have one controller action controlling any request we make through GraphQL. We also have a bunch of different things here. We have this Flunchine backend schema, which has a bunch of stuff in it. We have a bunch of crazy stuff that we probably don't need to touch. Like you're familiar with Rails and being given a whole lot of different files that you really don't have to think about. This is no different, right? But we also have a couple of different cool things here. We have this query type, which we're going to go ahead and demonstrate. And I think we can actually go ahead now and test this out for the first time, I think. So you'll notice that there's this field called test field right here that should return hello world. Cool. So now if I go over to Postman and I'm posting to GraphQL, I'm going to get rid of this. That's eventually going to be our token because I saved that. And I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to ask for test field. In this case, I'm going to ask for it. I'm going to ask for it camel case, not snake case. I do not know why, but it seems like it already knows that I'm going to want to be sending camel case things back here. But you'll notice as soon as I send in this test field request, that just looks like this, right? It actually probably looks something more like, oops. It probably looks something a little bit more like loop query. And then this. Let's see if this works. No. I'm going to try this again later when we have the fetch. But right now, it just spits back hello world. Cool. So now it goes ahead and says, hey, here's how you make your first object type. And I'm just going to type in. Let's go to the back end. Restaurant. And this is where it gets really cool and interesting. Cool. I'm going to generate a GraphQL object for, oops. RVM use 2.6.18. Sorry, I opened up a new console and we are on a different thing. But now I'm going to just generate this new GraphQL object restaurant, and it's going to spit out this new type field for us. Cool. And if we look at it, it has all of our fields from our database, right? This is all the things that you can have on a restaurant, right? What this is the default schema for a restaurant. Cool. So to just say reiterate what I said, all I've done so far is I've run GraphQL install, RailsG GraphQL install. First, I've added this to the database, this bundle add GraphQL, done RailsG GraphQL install, which gave us almost all of these files. And then finally, I ran RailsG GraphQL object restaurant. Cool. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to build out our first query. So we have this test one that it gave us, right? And I'm going to break this down a little bit. First, the first thing in this little class that you do, right, is you describe the field by going ahead and like giving it a name that's the same as the definition. This is a typed language or a typed domain specific language, which means you need to tell it what it's going to return. So in this case, right, we're not going to return a string. We're actually going to return an array, which is what the square brackets are, of restaurant type objects, where restaurant type is just this bad boy that we created here. Cool. Null, false. I think this one I'm blanking out on why this exists. But if we need it, we'll figure that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and say a list of restaurants. And at the end, which I haven't, like what a lot of tools will allow you to do is allow this to dynamically generate documentation for you, which is awesome. But then I'm just going to give this call this test field instead. Restaurants. Cool. And here, instead of returning hello world, I'm going to return restaurant.all. Great. So this right here is now a way to query restaurants. Cool. And it's using this restaurant type object. What this will allow me to do, hopefully this works. I can now get in this data an array of restaurants and only their name, their kinds of food, and their address. We can also create our own fields. We can be like field cheese string, of course, null, true, sure. I think that says, hey, this can not exist. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to be like def cheese Gouda. And now here, I can ask for cheese. Oh, and I used 3 E's accidentally. What? I used 3 E's here. Cool. Send. Definitely try this out beforehand and it worked. I might be missing something here. Do I have to do this? Yeah, there we go. Cool. You could even be like self.object.name plus cheese. Now if we do this again, we have Naya Chelsea cheese, we have Anytime cheese, we have Citizens of Chelsea cheese, we have Chirp cheese. All of these are perfect. Friedman's cheese. Yeah, these are all legit sounding cheeses. So this becomes, hey, these are all the things you can ask us for. Cool. Question so far? Yeah.
So you're using Postgres. No, how are you getting this data? Which service are you using, and how would you apply that to your front end, just as a search option?
Yeah, let's go ahead. So right now I'm posting to localhost 3000/GraphQL, right? I'm giving it this bad boy. Cool. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to try my best right now to go to our favorite website right here. And then here, I'm going to inspect the page. Open up our trusty little console, right? And this might take a couple times for me to remember how to do this, but const rest query. Let's just call this query. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to copy, paste this. Cool. I think this is right. We can also just go, right, I forgot I can just do this because we're in Java. Cool. Yes, this should work. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this. So we've got this const query that's just, I copied and pasted this as a string. Cool. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is copy this. I'm going to go to http://localhost 3000/GraphQL. I'm going to do a method of post. This is normal. This is normal. Here, I'm going to give it an object which has a key of query and a value of our query. And then I'm going to go ahead and console log it. Ooh, what did I do wrong? I shouldn't have got it back that quickly. Oh, right. Sorry. MDN's not allowing me to fetch from it. let's go ahead and fetch from a much more normal site our own app. Right, I need to find query again. Here we are. Cool. Now we can go ahead. And try this again. And you'll notice right here, we now get an array of 105 restaurants. All I did was I made this string, right? I passed it in as the value of something that has a key of query. I posted it to the backend, and I got back 105 restaurants. And if we look at each of the restaurants, we only get the address, cheese, the kind of name, and the name. Cool, right?
So those restaurants are not in your database, right? Normally you say only 50 restaurants to your database.
Oh, no, we have 105 restaurants now. I think we changed our code a little bit, but if we go to our backend, I think now I go ahead and for some reason, let's go ahead and say cd lunchtime school lunchtime backend RVM use 2.6.8 and then Rails C restaurant count 105. I think I've done something weird that I totally forgot about. Where back in our models. Maybe I just seeded the database a little bit more. But we now have 105 and we're getting 105 back. Cool. But if we didn't want that, we can go ahead and we can start changing this a little bit. We go back to our documentation. And here we're going to go ahead and ask for executing queries. And right here, you'll notice it actually allows us to give this arguments. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a do here and an end. And here, instead of giving this, it gives you an example of, hey, what if you wanted to do a show route, right? That gives back exactly one post. You'd be like, hey, give it an argument of ID, make it required. Yeah. Here, I'm going to give it an argument that I'm going to call limit. I'm going to make it an integer. I'm going to make it required false. Let's make it required true for now. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to just write limit right here. The exact same way they did it. Now, if I go over here and I say, hey, if I only want 20 of them, or I only want 4 of them, it will go ahead and completely make a fool of me in front of everybody. Let's take a look. Oh, right. Duh. And now if I call restaurant.limit and then limit right here, we can now get only 4 restaurants. So you'll notice now I'm just passing in arguments here, which is the next thing I'm going to show you. Basically, I can go ahead and make this false. I can say, hey, default the limits to 50. I can also give it give it an argument of location. We'll make this a string. This one's going to get a little bit weird. No, I'm going to do that one later. But now this is like basically how I define an argument here. Now I can be like, hey, I'm expecting that there can be a limit And first off, if you call like restaurant dot limit nil, you just get all the restaurants. So if you call restaurant on a limit of nil, you're fine. But if you give it 5, you get 5 restaurants. So here, I'm giving it arbitrary version, an arbitrary 50, but they can always be like, hey, I only want 4. And because I've defined it here in this argument section and then used it here, it works. Cool. But this is only like partially helpful, right? Like this is cool. It's really exciting that we can do a serializer from the front end, basically, which is what this is. But this is about to get a little bit cooler. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to now generate a second type that I'm going to call review. Cool. And we, of course, have a review type in our backend, right? But now all I need to do to make this work is give this a field, a review that is a review type in an array. You'll notice there's this little bad boy right here. And because I already have a method for reviews that restaurant can call, it's just going to go ahead and call this if I want it to. But it can go a little bit cooler and a little bit further here. Because this is of a review type, which is also a GraphQL thing, right? I can go ahead and be like, hey, I also want reviews, but I only want the rating. We send this over. Now we have an array of ratings, right? This doesn't actually make my SQL query more efficient. You'll notice that it's grabbing this 4 different times. You're still going to be in charge of being like, hey, I think you can do like eager load reviews the limit. I think this might solve our problem a little bit. Cool. And now it's a one big join. And you could also do like joins, right? And I think that'll also probably solve your problem. But we can now do some cool things with this, right? I can go ahead and be like, hey, for a restaurant, let's go ahead and add one more user. Yeah. Now I can go ahead and say, hey, this also has a user, which is of user type. It belongs to a user. And I can go ahead and say username. And now we get the rating, we get the everything else we want. It just pops up. Yeah. How are you feeling? Cool. So at this point, we basically have a way of querying for our restaurants, right? Let's go ahead and add this to the front end. First off, get status, get add dot, get commit, add GraphQL query. Cool. Git push. At this point, I'm absolutely going to be building everything here on the front end on a branch. Git checkout graph -b GraphQL lecture. Now, I'm going to probably be showing you the wrong way to do GraphQL on the front end with React. There is actually a really, really powerful GraphQL client for React Redux called Apollo, which basically, as part of its functionality, it like gives you a bunch of hooks to do GraphQL, and it also goes ahead and basically replaces your Redux store with a cache. So it's weird to use it with Redux. So since we already have a Redux app built, I'm probably not going to like implement it. I'm not very familiar with it. But like, it has features to replace your Redux store, which is basically like, if you're like, hey, how do I incorporate this Apollo app into my Redux? Everyone's like, just replace Redux with your Apollo. But it's a cool technology. You're welcome to dive into it. But right now, we can go ahead and start building out a little tool to allow us to fetch from the front end and replace some of our fetches with this. So I'm going to just go to our action creator. I'm going to really quickly create like a function GraphQL that'll take in a query and basically just do what we just did. Return fetch right, fetch to API /plus/GraphQL. And we can go ahead and copy a bunch of our stuff here, so I don't have to write it again. Oops. And here, I'm just going to go ahead, say query. Or we can even go one step deeper and just go query right here. Cool. And now we can just do, hey, if we want to get restaurants, we can do GraphQL with an argument of restaurants. But when I'm using my get restaurants, I'm just using this for the index. So I really only need name, ID, image URL, kind of food. Now, I'm going to put a little debug here because this is good, or a little debugger here because this is going to get slightly different. I'm also going to double check that my work here is right. Then. Right. Cool. Now, if we refresh our app, you see how restaurants should get. NPM start. All right. Yes, I would. Cool. We're setting up. We're gonna hit our debugger. Here, instead of restaurants. Ooh. Is it case sensitive? Are we good? Cool. So here we call restaurants. We actually get back something that has data, and we actually have to call restaurants.data.restaurants, which is a mess. We can instead, I believe, if we do data, then we can just call, we destructure it initially, we can go ahead and call data.restaurants. Let's see if this works. Might mess up one more time, just to let us know that my syntax is terrible. You cool here? Thank you. And there we are. Cool. So now we have like all the stuff we still need, right? We can also refactor these bad boys, right? Which I'm probably not going to do right now. But like this can also be a GraphQL refactor, right? But let's go ahead and use this to do what it's meant to do, which is to give us a lot of specific information. We still have not created a little a filter to like allow us to like ask for specific kinds of food. We have not asked for a filter to do a bunch of other different kinds of things, right? So I'm going to first go ahead. I'm going to give us a couple more tools that we can use to make this a little bit cooler. Right now, in our restaurants controller, we're yielding all the restaurants. That's not exactly what I want to do in the long run. Instead, I want to go ahead and we have this help a little method in our services class, right? Yelp search.to-restaurants that'll take in a location, right? So at this point, what I would love to do is add a little method to restaurant that goes ahead and says def self.get by location. Then I can go Yelp search of new location dot to restaurants. And this should give me all the restaurants in a specific location. Let's go ahead and try this out. Restaurant.get by location, Iceland. Ooh, restaurant.get by location. Let's go with Chicago. All right, that's more like it. So you'll notice we now have a bunch of Chicago restaurants, right? Cool. So this isn't something that I haven't shown you before. This exists. We have this. This has been around for a bit, right? But the next step that I think would be really cool is if we can make it so that our GraphQL will search by the user by default unless given a location specifically. Cool. So basically the user we already know has a zip code on them, right? If I go like user.last, that zip code, that's 12345, which I don't think exists. So I'm going to go ahead and do 60647 because that's Chicago. I can see it right there. I'm going to just double check if there's no weird zip codes. I'll break my app. All right. New York and Chicago. So at this point, right? in my my GraphQL controller, right? In the query type, I would love to call get by location in user zip code, right? Now, I can't quite do this, right? But I can do something pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and switch this back. I'm going to do a little bybug right here. And then I'm going to go over to right over here, our backend schema. I think it's our backend schema. I might be clicking around for a second. Is it in query? It's not in query type. It's not in our backend schema. I do remember that this exists somewhere, and I hope I didn't comment it out or delete it. Right, duh, of course. I'm going to go to our GraphQL controller. You'll notice that this inherits from application controller, right? And this is what takes in a request, right? It runs this execute method. And here it gives me this very helpful little comment out thing. Context goes here. Query context goes here. For example, current user, current user. I'm going to go ahead and call this logged in user, right? But this is going to be inheriting from our application controller. Cool. Which has our logged in user currently set up. So calling this here should be possible, and we're going to find out it is. So I'm going to do one last thing. I'm going to take our authorization token. I'm going to put it into our GraphQL headers. Boop. Cool. And now the next time I go ahead and I refresh this, we go over to our console. We're hitting our bybug. So we can't just call logged in user in our in here. It doesn't work quite that well. We can do basically the next best thing. We can go ahead and call context a key of logged in user. Ooh. There we go, like that. And it gives us our user. Cool. So now I can be like, hey, user equals context, the key of logged in user. Now if I do by location, user.zip code, .eager load, sure, this works. And now if I refresh the page, get my bybug, continue. Then everything breaks because I did something wrong. What do I call this? Get by location. Let's call this by location. Cool. Nice. Cool. So now we notice that I'm still like seeing basically the same things, but if I log out, right? Anyone want to volunteer their zip code?
11206.
11206. 06. Cool. Raquel. Guest. Submit. And now we get back, hopefully, very slowly, a bunch. Do these places look familiar?
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know what's happening with the images. They're probably loading very, very slowly. I hope they're loading very slowly. Yeah, there we go. Still creating all of them. I'm gonna refresh this, see if it goes a little bit faster. Come on, buddy. They do exist. I think they're probably just not in my cache, so they're taking a while to get. There we go. Should probably set a lower limit on these now. But all right, it'll even show us that like, hey, this is taking a while to load all these images. But this goes ahead, this works now, right? And because we now have GraphQL, right? I can go ahead and make this a little bit more specific. I can go ahead and I can say, hey, I also want an argument that is a location as a string required false. Yeah. And then I can go ahead and give this. So I'm going to give this a default location of nil, right? And now I can just go ahead and say location or equals. So if location doesn't exist, set it equal to this zip code. And then I'm just going to pass this in as location right here. Cool. And now you're here. Cool. So now if I try this out, right, I can go ahead. I can be like, hey, I want four restaurants from our database. Oops, right. And I'm going to use this token that I had before that's saying, hey, this is New York, right? But then if I want to instead go, hey, I also want location Phoenix, Arizona. We now have restaurants in Phoenix. Cool. And we can go ahead and with this very cool tool at our disposal, we can now go ahead and create I'm actually going to do one more cool thing now that we have this, right? I'm going to go ahead and in our Yelp search, I'm going to update this. Say, kind of food. I'm going to default this to lunch. I'm just going to make this say kind of food. Cool. And then here, I'm going to go over to our GraphQL and be like argument kind of food string required plus kind of food. Sure. Or hard coding this in two different places because I want it to like work here, but I also want it to be available anywhere. I'm probably just going to rename the search at this point. search. And then back in restaurant, I'm going to call this search. Kind of food. And now I can go ahead right here. I can say, hey, give me 4 pizza places in Phoenix, Arizona. And it'll get mad at me because I gave it 2 arguments and expected one. No, you didn't. You expected 2 arguments. Am I forgetting how to do a default argument here? Do I have to do like a little equals? Yeah, there we go. 4 pizza places in Phoenix, Arizona. Very cool. Right? So this is a lot of features right now. So I'm going to go ahead and implement them. All right, buddy. And we should probably pass over this limit now. Limit. And finally, over here, limits, so that we don't end up getting 50 pizza places in Phoenix, Arizona every time we just want 4. So now if I go, hey, I want all the Thai places in Kansas City, Missouri, we get that Kansas City almost has 4 Thai places. Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot, Kansas City. But Lenexa, I'm sure, is a suburb in Kansas, unlike Kansas City. So we now have this, and on my back end, I didn't do something crazy like asking for 50 different spots. Cool. I go ahead. I'm going, first off, add this to GitHub. Exit, git status, git add dot git commit. Search by location and kind of food. And at this point, I am going to go ahead. I'm going to start implementing this on the front end a little bit more. Let's go ahead and create a new component that I'm going to call search form. Yes, cool. This can be a little functional component. Search form. Oop, props. Do you even need props? I don't know if we need props. Yeah, we probably need a map dispatch to props. So we can go ahead and import. Let's go ahead and let's start returning something real quick so that we have something to begin working with. Label. Let's go ahead and say kind of food. Input type equals text. Value equals TBD. On change equals E to E.target of value being passed in to a function that let's go ahead and call it right now. Const kind of food. Oops. Get set kind of food equals use states. Thank you. Let's go ahead and give this an empty string. let's go ahead and make a little placeholder. I'm gonna say pizza pie. Do this a couple more times. All right, yes. Set kind of food. Kind of food. I'm gonna go ahead and call this one location. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Cool. And finally, I think that's good enough. We don't need to ask them for a lot of fancy stuff here. But here, you can go ahead, do the same thing. Oops. Location. Set location. Give it a little input type equals submit value equals search for some food. Cool. Export default search form. We'll probably change this a lot eventually. Put this in our little bad boy right here. I too am hungry. Great. And then finally, in our restaurants index, let's just slap that a little search form. Search form. Let's refresh this page, see if everything breaks because I didn't copy and paste anything. Ooh. All right, dude. You take a long time. All right, cool. Kind of food location. The pizza and Thai are not locations. So let's go ahead and change that slightly. Placeholder. Normal, Illinois. Cool. And last but not least, let's go ahead and actually do something with this. Let's do a little on submit equals take an e.prevent default on submit equals on submit. How are we feeling about all this part right now? Am I losing anybody? We remember controlled forms at all? Cool. And last but not least, let's go ahead and do something with it. Let us go over to our action creators. And here, I'm wondering what happens. I haven't actually tried this out yet. What happens if I do this? Does it break? Oop. Yes. So here, let's go ahead and change up our get restaurants a little bit. I'll be like, hey, give us a location. Give us a kind of food. We have to do a little bit of fancy JavaScript here. Nope, this is let arguments. If there's no location, there's or there's a kind of food, we'll probably need to go ahead and give it some arguments. Else arguments this bad boy. And then I'm going to just string interpolate arguments. And then right here, I can go ahead and figure this one out with some clever string design. It's gonna be more fun as an array. Let's make an array. No. I'm gonna go ahead and do this the old-fashioned way. We can make it more fancy JavaScript later. Put these whole things in parentheses. Let's give this a, if there's a location, then give it a string of location. God, this is gonna be so messy. Location. This is why we usually use frameworks when we're doing this. Otherwise, give it nothing, and then do the same thing for let's try this. This is gonna be goofy. I recognize it's goofy. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I'm trying to do here. I don't want to mess with this, right? I don't want like this is right now pretty finicky. I want to have a situation where if I have a location, then our arguments ends up looking like location Poughkeepsie. If I have a kind of food, I want it to be like location Poughkeepsie. Oops. And then oops. Ooh, this is going to need to be comma separated. I meant to write some very gross code unless I go ahead and do something smarter. I'm going to turn this into, I'm going to pass in an array. And here I'm just going to go ahead and like the array is probably going to be something that looks like So let's go ahead and comment that out. Bring out R, join. So map object to a string that is right. E value. We can do that. Sorry, I just got really caught up in this. I didn't really think about how crazy this would be to do without a framework. But let's go ahead and do key colon value subjoin with comma separated values. I forget how to do default value in JavaScript. Can I just do this? Cool. And here you can be like const arguments equals this bad boy. So what I'm really doing right here is I'm going to go ahead and do something very weird. Here I'm going to go back to our search form. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send props dot get restaurants. Let's go ahead and do this is me coming up with a very bad solution on the spot, but so basically I'm going ahead, I'm just assembling an array of arguments if those arguments exist. Otherwise I'm passing in an empty array and then I'm mapping through them and creating a big string. This is probably going to be goofy and probably going to break, but let's try it out. Why not? Oh, I can't use the word arguments. I'm going to call this args. On submit is not defined. Const. There we go. I saved you. All right, didn't fail this time. Cool. And then here I'm going to go ahead, import connect from React Redux, import get restaurants from action / redux / action creators. Going to connect null this bad boy, this, and then here I'm going to use get restaurants right here to go ahead and make this work. Let's refresh this page. Here I'm going to ask for pizza in New Haven, Connecticut, because they won't shut up about it. Connecticut. I have nope, that's right. Search for some food. All right. We get a parse error. That makes sense. What did we send over? Ah, I'm almost there. I made it like way more complicated than that. I said, make this an object with a key of kind of food and a value of, okay, I'm gonna show you this again, and then we're going to try it one more time. Pizza in New Haven, Connecticut. Let's try this one more time. Nope. Let's refresh this page one more time, then do it. I apologize, y'all, for freestyling here. Let's go. Pizza, New Haven, Connecticut. Object, no. Let's give this a little debugger action. See what we can do. After this, I will probably give up and show you something else for a little bit. Yeah, I know. Combines the worst of two things: a pizza culture that's not New York and Ivy League culture. No offense. Try this again. Cool. What's args doing right here? That's awesome. That's exactly what I wanted. What's R doing here? R is an array, one location. All right. Oh. Oh, is this actually way easier than I thought? Mm. Nope. Right. I think I have to do something like. Right. I can't just call key and value there. This is going to be the worst. There's definitely a better solution here that I'm just missing. But this is why we have frameworks. I hope I didn't. Ruin GraphQL for you. There we go. Dot join, comma. Thank you. Cool. Gotta put these in little parentheses, of course. This is gonna be a mess. Let's try it out. Okay. Get restaurants equals search values, you think? Try that out after that. I'm just worried that we're not doing, we gotta like put this in a very specific string format. Let's try it out. One more try. Refresh. Are you gonna break before I do anything? That's the first question, because I've got a handle for both cases where I don't have any information. And where, nice, okay. Pizza, New Haven. No. Really derailed this lecture. Ah, yeah, right. Last thing, give these little bad boys quotes. Cool. Yes. We got there eventually in the worst possible way, but I think this is it. And there we go. We now have pizza in New Haven, Connecticut. Let's go ahead and click this. Yep, this is New Haven. This works. Go ahead, start adding things to this form if we want to. We can go say, hey, I also want add a limit, which everyone knows about. This way we can be nicer to our app. Same thing here. And we can do the same thing here. Limit and end args push. Incredibly gross code. But I can't think of a better one right now. Cool. And so now we can, if we are actually New Haven, Connecticut, we can be more honest with our, oops. We can be more honest with ourselves. And limit it to the 4 pizza places that they actually have. And we're good. Eventually. No, did I break it again? In which case, I'm going to back off. Right, limits an integer. This is going to get very confusing. I can't wrap strings around an integer. Please use a framework if you're going to do this in a fancy way. I'm going to stop this messing with this here. This is still very, very powerful. I wish I thought about the queries in advance. There's one last thing I want to talk about. I'm not really going to get into today because I didn't have time and because it's, I think it's just because I didn't have time. But queries are one thing you can do in GraphQL. GraphQL also allows you to create stuff. You can like create a mutation. And let's see if we can dig up what a mutation looks like. So mutation basically allows you to send stuff over and then change things on the back end. Let's see if here's a tutorial. I might be able to just scan down to, hey, build a mutation. Cool. So eventually, if you want to like go ahead and create something or send something over, right? That's also possible in GraphQL. It's not just, and you can even, right? You can even in your mutation. This is a lot of stuff I didn't expect to have to look at right now. Want me to try to build one? It's probably pretty gross. Let's go ahead and try one. Cool. So this is what a mutation request kind of looks like. You go ahead and say, hey, I want to create a review. I want to give it an input of a restaurant ID of 1, content of wow, and a rating of 4. And I want to get back, once you're done with that, a rating, some content, a user, and a username, right? So now, I go to my backend. I'm going to just do GraphQL. Mutation. Create review. I'm definitely not going to get this done in time, and I'm going to forget a lot of things too. But we can now go to our backend. And we can start being like, hey, we want to return as a review. That's a review type. I'm going to give it arguments of let's go ahead with restaurant ID, which is an ID. It's of course required. I'm going to give it an argument of rating, which is an integer. Required true. I'm going to give it an argument of content, which is a string. Required true. At this point, I'm going to give it restaurant ID. Content, I believe. And here, video review. All right. Context logged in. I think that's user that reviews that creates restaurant ID, restaurant ID, rating, content. It's really hoping to go through the docs with you guys because I'm not that familiar with how to build this. I'm not good enough to do this from memory, or bad enough. But let's go ahead. Double check that we got this. It's got to be attached to my schema. This is a terrible little documentation right here. Do I have to do something here? Let's go ahead and try it out. Definitely got a bunch of errors. Field rating does not exist on type create review payload. Interesting. I might do this later and then show you all. I think I also probably have it on a practice.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you are searching like different location and different type of food, and you don't take like those informations from your backend. You take like from Yelp IP. So
Yeah.
how you are going to make reviews and how you are going to save in your database, because there's no restaurant ID, I think.
That's not exactly correct. So basically one very weird thing we did right here in our services is right here, we're finding or creating, right? So we're actually creating these restaurants in our database every single time we make a Yelp search, or we're finding it based on the Yelp ID. This is like something I built out here. So we're returning the same restaurants every time. If we get a new restaurant, it's just created in our database, and the next time we'll have found it, right? We can trust Yelp IDs to be unique, and that's how we're allowing it to like make this work. So if I eventually go back to our app, which I think I broke, we can go to, let's refresh. We can go review this, right? It's food. Cool. We get nice. Now, if I refresh the page, it's still going to ask Yelp about it, right? But then it's going to check our database, say, hey, we already actually have this one, we're good. And then it'll still be there.
Okay, thank you.
And then right here, I'm just going to go git checkout GraphQL because I think I did this already. And we can see what a mutation looks like. Great. What did I do differently? Git checkout. What I do? Git branch. Oh no. Review. We have create review here. Let's go ahead and compare them. Oh, I gave it a type. That's important. All right, I was almost there. Let's go ahead and just copy. No, that's probably a bad idea. Let's do it. Let's do it anyways. Copy. Paste. Cool. We'll call this create review mutation now. And let's try it out one last time. Oop. I don't know. Schema is not configured for mutations. At this point, I forgot what I did to make this work when I tried it out a couple days ago. But let's try, take one last look. There's almost definitely something I'm forgetting. It's probably in some guide. And I don't want to keep you too far over. But we'll dig into it later, if that's cool with everybody. I am sort of on the end of what we can do here. Let's try that. I'm going to just eyeball this really quickly. Really? I think I have to inherit it in my mutation types. Yes, here we are. I now just entirely on the wrong branch. Mutation type. Mutation. Okay, let's try that. Undefined method reviews for nil class. What? Logged in user. There we go. That's a normal error. Hey, and there we got it. If we send this again, let's ask for the ID back so that you can see that we're getting different ones. Wow, 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 wow. This is going to be the most annoying thing to look at in our database, but we have now created it. So what we basically do, right? I'm sorry this took me so long to remember. But basically, you can go ahead in your backend. There's this mutation type field where you can give it mutations to inherit, right? You go ahead and say like, hey, find a module mutations, create mutation. This will all be generated for you ostensibly, right? And then basically you can go ahead and start defining your arguments, give it a type of what you're promising that it will return. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, it's going to return a review. And then we can basically write a function as per usual that's called resolve that will go ahead and do what you tell it to do, and ideally should return a review of the same type. Then GraphQL just has this weird format where you go ahead and you say, hey, this is going to be a mutation. Recall, in specifically, it's this create review mutation. Here's all the inputs, right? And then it'll send that for you, right? In order to change anything with GraphQL, and this is the thing I'm going backwards to talk about because I am scattered, you have to define how GraphQL allows you to change your database. And the way you define it is by like literally defining a mutation like called create review mutation that takes in arguments in a specific way. And then you basically document this for your future users. And one of the cool things about like GraphQL languages, right, or GraphQL frameworks is almost all of them will generate documentation for you. I'm not going to demonstrate that today, already 7 minutes over. But I wanted to prove that GraphQL wasn't just a place for reading, it also allows you to write stuff too. And altogether, this is a really, really common thing that you will see in the job market. If you like, I would recommend at some point when you graduate, build it especially if you're applying for a backend job or a full stack job, build a GraphQL endpoint and build a couple of queries and a couple of mutations, and then just put it on your resume, because it's something you can learn in a night. It's something you can learn maybe 2 nights, and it looks really, really good. It's the one thing that other boot camps at this point have over us. Like a lot of them have pivoted to teaching either GraphQL entirely because they're scared of teaching relationships because they're so hard, or relational, like they like skim over relational databasing in favor of GraphQL, or other things. So if you've learned it, it's really good to have on a resume to stand out, and to make sure that you're at least competing. Cool. All right, appreciate it all. I'm sorry I taught you something that I learned, like just practiced like 3 hours before now and like started learning yesterday, but I was like, this would be a really cool thing that I really want to teach. And now you kind of get a little bit more of my process. All right, later.
Thank you, Nikki.